Okay. So, Board Member Mercado, would you like to begin the meeting?
Yes, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Can we have a call to order, please? Roll call, I'm sorry, roll call.
I'll give that. Chair Mercado,
Yes,
Councillor Madera,
Present.
Councillor Grimes, Board Member Flores,
Present.
and then Board Member Hall. She's not present.
thank you. Do we have minutes to approve from our last meeting?
So no, there's no minutes and there's no real script per se.
Okay,
Again, because it's a study session, it's a lot less formal. So we really don't do introduction of staff. We
Okay.
don't do approval of minutes. It's just kind of, here's our first study session item and then we go from there.
okay, perfect. So we can start our study session now.
So I'll give a quick introduction about the study session. I started here in October and been put in charge of the Derby Review Board. And during that time, Steve Timms, the planning manager, as well as various board members have brought up that a study session is requested for the Derby Review Board. And during a study session, we'd like to speak about, or the board members would like staff to review Robert's Rules of Order, the Colorado Sunshine Laws, and then there have been various questions about future policies from the board members, as well as questions about past policy and procedures from staff. And so the study session is bringing all that information together, rules of procedure, policies for the board, Robert Rules of Order, and a quick introduction of the Colorado Sunshine Laws from staff to the board. And at the end of this introduction and review of all of those items, we'll then pose questions to the board and have an open-ended discussion about the current state of policies and where staff believes the board should potentially move with legal recommendations, as well as garnering the board's recommendations and what they would like staff to work on with policies and procedures and everything I've mentioned thus far. And so to start off, Ryan Swan has a presentation about Robert's Rules of Order and Colorado Sunshine Laws.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Nathan. Good evening, folks. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Swan. I've been with the city for close to 3 years now as an assistant city attorney. I, up until this point, haven't been too involved in council stuff, boards and commissions, things like that. So that's why I might be a pretty new face to some of you. But obviously, we've had some turnover in the office pretty recently, and you'll probably start seeing my face more and more unless I win the lottery or get hit by a bus or something like that happens. But I was assigned the honor, frankly, of assisting with the Derby Review Board and with really helping you folks with whatever you need to make this board work better for you and for our applicants and ultimately, obviously, for our community and specifically for the Derby area. So this is going to be a pretty open-ended, pretty informal study session tonight. I'm going to start by just very briefly going through some open meeting law concepts. A lot of you, the city's council folks especially, you guys have gotten trained on this stuff before. Good chance, frankly, some more of the ins and outs than I do. But for those of you who may not be as familiar, I think it's helpful just to kind of go through some of the nuts and bolts of the open meetings law. And then I wanted to kind of get into talking about some of the existing rules, policies, and procedure that Derby has, and figure out some ways that this board can formalize and make some things more clear while still preserving kind of the flexibility and some level of, I guess you could say, informality that we really like about Derby, and what I think makes this board kind of unique and nimble. So to that end, I don't intend this being a super long presentation. If you have specific questions about especially things relating to the open meeting law, feel free to ask or shoot me an email later, and I'm happy to get back to you on those questions. Like I said, I don't intend for this to be a full exhaustive presentation of the open meeting law. There's plenty of that exists elsewhere, but I am very happy to answer specific questions. If not offhand, then later I can follow back, especially specific questions that pertain to how open meeting laws affect this particular board and what it does. So without further ado, I'll hop into a little presentation here. Wow, it has been a while since I've used a actual.
Hey, Brian, this is Councilmember Grimes. May I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, please do.
I just wanted to let the record reflect that I was present now. I was trying to respond during roll call and my phone was frozen. So I am here.
Welcome, Councilmember Grimes. Okay, so I have 3 monitors open and I am seeing the slideshow and pretty much all of them. Are you folks able to see Derby Review Board, February 15th, 2022 study session?
You have not shared your screen yet, Brian.
So I guess I have to click one of these or something. Just because I'm technically a millennial doesn't mean that I always get this stuff right. How about now?
Perfect.
Are you all able to see the title page, Derby Review Board, February 15th, 2022 study session?
We do.
Groovy. All right. So as I mentioned, let's start by talking about the open meetings law. And for you council folks, this probably is not going to be the most exciting material, but basically, in the state of Colorado, we have a law called the Open Meetings Law, and what it does essentially is imposes certain requirements of openness, notice, and taking of minutes and other various transparency requirements on quote unquote meetings of quote unquote local public bodies. The Open Meetings Law has a number of nuances to it and a number of other provisions and requirements beyond openness, notice, and the minute taking requirement, but I'm going to kind of focus on those 3 for the purposes of tonight and this presentation. Frankly, as I kind of alluded to earlier, Derby's just a little bit more informal, a little bit lower stakes, I should say, than something like a full-blown city council meeting or you know, the planning commission or what have you. I don't mean that to you know, to minimize the work that the board does by any means, but it's a specialty board. It's more of its own unique creation, and I don't think it necessarily calls for the same level of discussion into some of the topics that, you know, maybe Matt or somebody would get into with you when talking about council policies and procedures and what have you. But I do think it is important to highlight that The Derby Board is in fact a local public body that must conduct its meetings consistent with the open meetings law. It's city created board. It's been delegated governmental decision-making functions in that it obviously takes actions on development applications, requests for variances, and requests for catalyst funds. So open meetings law, big takeaway, it applies, but it's highly unlikely that well, hopefully not, never say never, that a lot of the same nuance and detail that will often come to issue at council meetings will come up as we work our way through our future board meetings. So there we go. So anyway, let's talk about key requirement number 1 of the open meetings law, and that is in first letter of the law itself, openness. Anytime 3 or more members of the board get together and discuss public business, of which, you know, if you're at a meeting and you're talking about anything related to Derby, I would call that public business, just to make things simple. Or any kind of formal action might be taken, we're operating under the OML. This is a gathering, that's a public meeting, and there are certain requirements that the discussion be open to the public. In a pre-COVID world, it was often, you know, literally a meeting in a room, and the law has since evolved to become more compatible with virtual meetings like we're having right now. So the key meaning of being open and being public is that really it's accessible for people to watch for free if they want to, that they're properly noticed, that we're not you know, muting ourselves and whispering things in each other's ear, et cetera, et cetera. Openness, it is exactly what it sounds like. So 3 members is the trigger, or an anticipated quorum is what's going to trigger the requirement to give advance public notice, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And that's basically it as far as openness goes. You know, everything transparent, formal actions. Anytime you have a vote on something, it's got to be a voice vote, and you know, again, discussions open to the public unless there are one of several exceptions applies that I'm not really going to go into for the purpose of this presentation, because I just don't see us ever really having something like an executive session or what have you during a Derby review board meeting, maybe, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. This is just a broad overview to kind of set up for where I want to get to, and that's the discussion about our policies and rules of procedure. Notice. So critical element of Derby meeting.
Ryan, I'm
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but I don't see your slides advancing.
don't see the slides advance. Interesting. What are you seeing? Did that-
Okay, now we see the openness slide, and the next one would be notice.
Yeah, my computer hates when I share things. Let me try something here real quick. Sorry, guys. What are we seeing now?
We see the slide on minutes.
Cool. That's how it's supposed to look. Thanks for catching me there, Anita. All right, so that was the openness slide that apparently wasn't up before, but everything was just covered there. Notice, second key component of the open meetings law is anytime you're going to have an open public meeting held by a board, commission, city council, of which Derby falls into that category, there needs to be full and timely notice to the public. So under the open meetings law and under a city resolution that we passed last year, kind of in the wake of COVID, notice of public meetings needs to be posted online, at least for the purposes of the open meetings law. But under the city resolution, there's also a requirement that notice is posted in the atrium as well. And I want to highlight the last sentence, that second bullet there really closely. The manner in which the meeting is going to be held needs to be specified in the notice. We're kind of entering a weird transitory world here where some things are going back to normal, back to in person, some things are virtual and some things are hybrid. It's really, really important that whoever's putting the notice together for each meeting specify exactly how the meeting is going to be conducted. And if it's going to be virtual, there has to be a link for members of the public to be able to watch, stuff like that. I've haven't really participated all that much yet, but I've sat through, observed, I think 4 Derby board meetings now, and I've looked at the packets and looked at the notices, and I've been pretty pleased with what I've seen so far in terms of all of the requirements that need to be in the notice document being in there. I was talking to Nathan earlier. Nathan's going to check and make sure that notice is also posted in the atrium as is required under the city resolution. But otherwise, I think this is primarily handled by admin staff, and from what I've seen, they do a pretty nice job of it. Notice has to include specific agenda information. The law has this phrase "where possible" in it. I would just read that as, please make sure posted notices have specific agenda information, i.e., what's going to be considered at the meeting for the evening. Again, a lot of this stuff handled by admin, but probably good for everybody on this call to get a refresher on anyway. And this last point here, it may seem a little bit intuitive, but simply providing general notice in some kind of web page or news bulletin or whatever, that the Derby Review Board meets on the 3rd Tuesday of every month at this location at 5:30. So that's not going to pass muster into the open meetings law. There actually has to be a specific document with specific notice of where the meeting is going to be held, what time, and that has to happen at least 24 hours before the meeting takes place. So some kind of statement on a fact sheet or city website that the review board meets in room wherever at the Civic Center 3rd Tuesday of each month. That's probably not going to fly under the open meetings law. Again, admin does a nice job with this stuff. Don't want to bore you guys too much with the details, but this will tie into some of the discussion that I want to have a little bit later. And then lastly, another key requirement of the open meeting law is that minutes be recorded for every public meeting or open meeting held by the public bodies, such as the Derby Board. Any board, city council, what have you, needs to have a designated clerk or some other secretary or official who takes minutes at a meeting. I also noted in here that there should probably be a backup clerk or a backup secretary as well, because minutes are going to be required at any meeting, not just where formal action actually does occur, but minutes are required at any meeting at which the adoption of any proposed policy, position, resolution, rule, regulation, or formal action occurs or could occur. So this comes up every so often. I think there was one meeting at least where we didn't have a quorum and weren't able to actually go forward with our case in the applicant's presentation. And for example, for that meeting, there were still minutes, and we're still required to have minutes and post minutes pursuant to the open meetings law. And the law does require the minutes be recorded and posted promptly and be considered a public record, open to inspection pretty much right after the meeting takes place. Again, staff nowadays, I should say, does a good job with this, and I'm pretty pleased. But having to, in my prep for this study session, I went back to some minutes of yesteryear, and it was kind of hard to follow what was going on. So this could be a topic that we address in any kind of future rules or policy documents that we want to create for this board. What is to be included in meeting minutes, and just kind of formalize that a little bit. The open meetings law, somewhat surprisingly, doesn't really have a whole lot of substance as far as what needs to go into minutes, but there's all kinds of other guidance out there in the matter. And like I said, staff's been doing a nice job so far, at least for as long as I've been involved with the board. So that's all I've really got on the open meetings law for you today. It's not a super complex law, at least not really for the purposes of Derby. Again, hopefully most of what I have seen from Derby so far is pretty collaborative. It's pretty collegial. Comparatively, it's fairly low stakes compared to big council items or big development applications. So I don't necessarily feel the need to harp on this stuff too much. As I said earlier, I'm happy to answer specific questions or follow up on anything in here as needed, but I just haven't seen any real red flags with how Derby's been conducted in my time I've been observing the board to really go too crazy with getting into the weeds with this law here. So before I kind of move on here, any questions about the open meetings law and how it relates to Derby? Any of the requirements that I talked about? Great. So what I want to do with the rest of this time here, I don't want to hog it all to myself. I want to open it up to some discussion among you folks, but I first want to, and I've spent the last several days kind of doing some work on my own, just as to the history of the Derby Review Board and sort of where it came from and how it's kind of evolved over the years to what it is now. And just kind of highlighting sort of where we're at with the board in this place in time. Our current operative, or I guess you would say authoritative document, is ordinance number 2043, which I believe was passed in 2013. That's what created or kind of recreated the board in conjunction with council's approval of the Second Amendment to the Derby sub-area PUD zone document. And basically what that ordinance functionally does is it gives the board certain powers. I have it up on a slide coming up here, so I'm not going to read it. But it establishes the powers that the board has, and it just clarifies that we have to be operating within the parameters of the power and the authority that the ordinance gives the board, and that also the city charter gives the board. So there it is, ordinance number 2043 in all its glory, and you'll see up top there a statement of purpose for the board, and then all of you are on the board, so you know what it does. And 1, 2, 3, those are our big items. Take action on development applications, hear requests for variances, and then take action on requests for catalyst funds. And then implied within those 3 key powers is the power the Derby Review Board to establish our own policies and rules of procedures for how to best carry out those functions, which will be the subject of our open discussion in just a few moments. Down here, this stuff about composition qualifications, meetings and quorum, those kind of speak for themselves. So skip over those for now. Let's talk about Charter Section 11.1. So this is a really, really important section of the city charter that kind of establishes the framework for boards and commissions and how they're supposed to operate, what limits on their authority are, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. There's a lot of really important stuff in here that I would encourage you all, if you haven't read through this section in close detail, or if it's been some time, to please do so. I'm not going to read all of it for right now, but you'll see that I did highlight a few things. Starting at number 6. So this section of the charter authorizes this board to choose its own officers and adopt its own rules of procedure. Adopting rules of procedures is really going to be the subject of our discussion coming up here. These other items, there's a good bit of overlap with what I just talked about with the open meetings law, basically that meetings of the boards and commissions should be open to the public. Study sessions technically don't have to for, at least not for all boards and commissions, but if there's going to be any kind of formal or binding action that may be taken, it can't happen at a study session. And then our charter, again, kind of syncing up with some of the requirements of the open meetings law. There has to be minutes of the meetings, and those need to be kept on file and made available to the public for inspection, along with copies of records of what was presented at the actual meeting. And that's a topic I want to discuss a little bit too, when we get into talking about the actual rules of procedure. Lastly, really quick here, no city council member is allowed to be the chair. So just quickly touching on that. If you're on city council, congratulations, you can't be the chair of Derby or any other board. All right, I was just told that I got to speed up a little bit because we got some folks with their obligations. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. So the current document, I hope all of you folks had a chance to go through the packet and take a look at the document that's currently titled Derby Review Board Policies / Procedures, because that's kind of the number one subject of this meeting, because it's frankly insufficient, I think, to meet the needs of this board. I don't think that's really an overstatement to say that. I think it's great that Derby is a little bit more informal and that it's something that's not quite as procedurally rigid as something like a council meeting. But what we have right now in this Derby Board Policies and Procedures document is really just kind of a restatement of what's in the ordinance. And I got a kick out of the fact that the Policies and Procedures document says the board shall adopt rules for the transaction of its business, yet we don't have a rules procedure document that's actually been officially put together and approved yet. So it lacks specificity on a number of key items, like the general conduct of hearings, orders of proceedings and whatnot. You folks who are on other boards, on council, I've seen the council policies. There's a lot of them. We don't need to go that crazy with Derby. But what I would like to do, and what I've been asked to do, is try to provide a little bit more structure to the board and shore up some of these kind of nebulous policy documents, fact sheets, and things that are floating around, and really get some more organization and more structure to how this board runs in accordance with the feedback that I get from you folks. So here's our overarching suggested goals. I should really say they're kind of just mine, so feel free to chime in and rebut and disagree. But my sense is that this board could really use an official rules of procedure document. I mean, I look at the planning commission, and they have a very robust document that really goes from A to B to C to D and spells out, exactly how the whole planning commission process takes place. And we have some of that with Derby, but it's kind of scattered. It's kind of all over the place. There's some fact sheets, there's some informal documents that exist that I think have some important substance, but there needs to be some kind of a unification of a home for all these key substantive, well, I guess I shouldn't say they're substantive rules of procedure, but these really key tenets or precepts to how these meetings should actually run. So that's goal number one. Let's get a rules of procedure document, and let's make it a little bit more robust than the policies and procedures document that technically is currently supposed to be filling that void. Next, there are a number of policies that were previously adopted by the Derby Review Board, and I would expect in the future that the board might want to adopt other policies. These policies, unfortunately, though, oftentimes were just oral sort of statements at meetings that were codified into minutes, and then boom, we now call that a policy. And the way I look at it is, we're going to have a policy for something. It should really be a standalone document, and it should look, I don't know that in the interest of time, I really need to pull up the council policy document, but I think you folks kind of get what I'm talking at. If we're going to have a policy, it should be formally adopted by a majority vote, and it should be in writing. I think our past policies were voted on, so at least half of that component was fulfilled, but I was struggling to actually find written versions of previous policies that were adopted by this board, and that's a little bit concerning to me. So I'd like to get that shored up, and I'd like to get all of our policies written and organized and clearly identified and in kind of a more organized place. And lastly, this third bullet here, anything that's really important to the operation of Derby, everything that I just mentioned, policies, rules of procedure, fact sheets, etc. I think they should be easily identified and findable. If I'm a member of the public and I want to sort of get an FYI, okay, how do I submit an application to the Derby board? What is the Derby Review Board, et cetera, et cetera. It's a goal of mine, and it's something that I'd like to see, to have those documents be more open and transparent to the public. So those are my suggested goals. Feel free to, in a moment, bash them or laud them as you like. So anyway, a couple slides left here. I have taken a good chunk of time looking at what we currently have in the Derby policies and procedures and the various fact sheets that we have, and kind of comparing that with some of the other boards and commissions, with some of the council policies, and especially the planning commission rules of procedure. And what I would like to see come out of the Derby Review Board is a new rules of procedure document. And just based on what I know about the open meetings law, and just for a variety of different reasons here that I'm not really going to get into in the interest of time, these are some topics that that I am going to put into a working draft rules of procedure document that I didn't prepare for tonight because I wanted you folks to be able to give feedback on a number of items, which you'll see on the next slide. And it kind of didn't really make sense for me to do it piecemeal. But these are some topics that you can expect to see covered in whatever working draft we discuss at our next study session. And if you want to kind of get an idea of what some of this stuff is going to look like, I think the Planning Commission rules of procedure are excellent. Anita and Nathan and I were discussing this earlier. Board members, if you all could review that document and sort of look at it with an eye towards, okay, what parts of this would be good for Derby? What provisions, which language, which sections would be helpful for the operation of the Derby board? I think that would be a great help for us at the next meeting. I don't think we need the same level of detail as the Planning Commission rules of procedure, and obviously there are things. Derby review process is frankly just different than the Planning Commission review process because it's tailored to a specific geographic area. Operates within the guidelines and the PUD, et cetera. But I think the Planning Commission rules of procedure is well done. And that can be thought of kind of as like a starting point or a template for where I'd like to see Derby go with a formal rules of procedure document. And now, best slide. This is where I kind of want to open it up a little bit to you guys and ask you what you would like to see in a formal rules of procedure document. Actually, I should probably start by asking generally if you're on board with the creation of such a document, and if so, what do we want to see in it? Do we want to change anything? Do we want to add anything? These are some possible additions that Nathan and I and Anita discussed earlier, possibly talking about more defined roles for chairs and officers, how they're selected for terms, maybe coming up with an attendance policy, some kind of a behavior or conduct policy or standards, modifying the meeting time and date, whatever. If you guys have thoughts on what's been working with Derby, what hasn't been working with Derby, what you think should be in writing, and what hopefully going forward will be kind of like our central functional governing document, feel free to fire away and I can take notes. And if we get some consensus on some things, I can throw them in a working draft and we can kind of talk through them in a future study session. So whoever wants to go first, what are we thinking? How do we want Derby to change, stay the same, and so on and so forth?
I also wanted to mention to everyone that we'll make sure that we get a copy of the presentation out for everyone so that you have notes to review and maybe contemplate some of these things. I'm also wondering if Nathan, you wanted to speak a bit more about the memo that you had provided regarding some of the policies that we had collected, for consideration during this time as well.
Yes, and just for everyone to take note, tonight we're not discussing Catalyst Fund policy. That will be discussed at a later study session. Tonight we're just focusing on the rules and procedures of Derby Review Board. I spent the last month scouring our online files and paper files looking for all of the policies and procedures that have been approved since the conception of the Derby Review Board. And really, there have not been many additional policies that have been adopted. The two most significant are a denied applicant policy, which outlines when an applicant can apply for the Derby Review Board again if they've been denied, as well as some permanent signage policy, putting limits on how long temporary signage can remain installed and still be considered temporary in the Derby sub area, as well as permanent signage policy stating that all permanent signage requires review and approval by the Derby Review Board. And then in addition, I've included in the memo the Derby Design Review Facts to Know. It's in essence a outward facing document that staff provides to property owners, applicants, and developers looking to develop in Derby or propose improvements. And it's a 5-page document. I won't get into everything, all the details, but it's a great resource that outlines the timeline, the processes, and the approval criteria for the review board. But as I mentioned earlier, we want to hear from the board about items they think are working or have been working, and generally just hear from you all on what can be improved, what can be codified, or what can be changed for the review board. I know earlier there was mention by Councilor Madera that the time may not be working for us, so that's one item I've already taken note of. But again, I just want to hear, or staff wants to hear from the board members.
Can I ask two really general questions to start? Question one I have. Do you guys think the board's working well? Any members? I'm getting the sense that there's sort of a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This kind of energy that I'm getting from everybody. And I just want to make sure that I'm clear about that, and that my sense is accurate, because I'm not really trying to reinvent the wheel with the board. I'd like to clean some things up, but anybody, is this working? Do we like where we're at as a whole with the board?
Hey, Brian, this is Megan. Aside from the time, which I agree with Councilmember Madera, is sometimes challenging and overlaps with some of our other commitments. I personally, Derby's my favorite committee that I serve on. Don't tell everybody I said that. Legitimately, it is the most enjoyable group to work with. I love the informalness of it, yet we still work within the confines of the rules.
Yeah.
And I feel like we really actually move projects forward in Derby, and I like that. And I would hate to see us slow the process by making it too kludgy, or too many rules to still be efficient.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I practiced some restraint a little bit and didn't come into the study session with a 15-page here guys, here are your new policies, rules of procedure, like hope you like them, because I get the sense that folks like kind of the more relaxed nature of this board. And frankly, from a legal perspective, I'm a lot, we still have to be careful, we still have to comply with the law, we still have to treat everybody fairly equally, all that good stuff. But I get the sense that this is just more of a collaborative and kind of collegial atmosphere between both the applicants and the members of the board. So I'm not really asking for big sweeping policy changes. And I guess this leads into my second question then. Do you all agree though that there's a need for a rules of procedure document and some organization when it comes to these policies and things?
Hey, Brian, here's what I'm wondering. I think that Anita is obviously our most tenured in this group. And she's been on the board as long as I've been with the city. But other than Anita, I think pretty much everybody else is
Yeah.
somewhat new to this and doesn't really maybe have a full understanding of what are the highs, what are the lows, where we need to. Yeah. So I'm wondering if, for the sake of conversation and time, if we're able to provide people with some suggestions or with what this looks like. And maybe give them time to kind of review it and look at it. And then at our next meeting for our administrative business, we kind of talk about what maybe some ideas have come up from that, what maybe some suggestions are, things of that nature. That way they have time to think about it, process it, and then come back with some ideas instead of just on the spot, like, oh, I don't know, I never really thought about it.
I guess, I think what me and Nathan are trying to get at is more of just like stuff like the start time and the day and do we want to create an attendance policy and kind of little things like that are what we're trying to get direction on, because those are the things that are frankly really hard for me to draft and propose, because like, for example, the planning commission, they have an attendance policy. Do you guys want one? Like, I have no idea. So I guess that's kind of what we're seeking input on is just sort of some, it can be small stuff. It doesn't have to be like these big sweeping changes, which is why I think a good exercise might be to take a look at the planning commission rules of procedure and we can kind of circle back on some things. I am going to prepare a working draft regardless for our next study session or what have you, just to cover some of the open meeting law stuff that I kind of skimmed through tonight, make sure our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted there. But things like attendance policies and behavioral conduct, how to talk to each other, how to be nice to each other, like we're really looking for feedback on if you think those things are necessary or appropriate. Like I can take this project as far or not as far as you folks want. If we want to have a super exhaustive, super detailed rules of procedure document that looks just like the planning commission rules, then great, we can do that. The sense that I'm getting though is probably not. So that's good. In the meantime, I would just suggest maybe take some time to stew on it, look at the planning commission rules of procedure. If any ideas pop into your head, shoot them my way. And the next time we convene, I'll come back with a working document that will be a lot of boring lawyer stuff, but hopefully you guys do have the opportunity to brainstorm a little bit. And the meeting time and date is something that I've seen firsthand be kind of a problem. So if we could get some kind of consensus around that, at least I'd feel a lot better. I think that's a good starting point, and then whatever else pops into your heads from there.
Anita, I see that you're unmuted. Did you have any thoughts?
So I was just thinking about what he said, and I think that actually, I agree with the part that if it's not broken, don't fix it, because I think we've been doing okay. We haven't had a full board for quite a while, and it was just the three of us, and now we're back to three of us again. And I think that working together, there was one point where one member was giving wrong information, and so I brought that to her attention, and we just worked on it, and I just wanted for the newer members to know actually, what is it that we do? I don't want to go out and promise a business.
Yeah.
We can help you get an air conditioner when that's not what we're there for. So that was the only thing that I've seen, and I've been on this board for several years now, but I just don't see any problems. And we're close with the community in the Derby, so if they have an issue or something, they come to us, they'll call and they'll say, what do I need to do? Who can I contact? And so I feel like we're not broken.
So that's really helpful, and that's sort of the answer I was kind of expecting to get from you folks. I still encourage you, especially that last slide of the presentation, Nathan. I don't know if you could circulate that to all the folks who are on the board and on this call right now. But those 5 questions that Nathan and I kind of came up with on the last slide there, I think it'd be good to get some direction on those. Other than that, I don't really want to go too crazy with this. I will probably draft a document with some boring lawyer stuff about ex parte communications and about biases and recusals and those types of things. But again, I'm not going to go crazy with it, and those are just more from a compliance perspective than me trying to totally rock the boat here, because I think this board is working for the most part, and I think it's collaborative, and I think having dialogue in these working sessions that aren't really subject to super rigid procedure are good for this specific type of board to a large extent. So
Hey, Brian, can I make another comment?
please do. Yeah.
So I definitely appreciate what you're doing, because it's something I've talked about in council before. And even if we don't have a problem today, it doesn't mean that there won't be a problem in the future. And sometimes it's better to have those rules in place for the future rather than dealing with an issue you have no reins to put around it if it arises without rules. So I get what you're doing, and I think it's a good idea. And Anita, I certainly don't want to step on your toes, so correct me if you disagree. But what I would ask for is for Brian to bring us a stripped down version of the planning commission rules, things that you think are appropriate for this board, and then give us something like a boilerplate to look at, like Anita Riley suggested. And I think that gives us a better starting point for conversation. And if we think it's too much, it's easy to strike some things. And if we get another idea and want to add something, I think that's an easier place to start from.
That I appreciate that, Councilmember Grimes, and that's something that Nathan and I actually were talking about just before we hopped on this call. Is we haven't had a real issue yet, but I mean, you never know. I'm an attorney, and we hope for the best and plan for the worst at all times. So here's what I'll do. I'm happy to take that direction and put something together. And what I'll do then basically is this existing policies and procedures document, and a lot of the existing stuff that's present in the Derby review process facts to know sheet. I'm gonna kind of leave it as is, and maybe I'll highlight it. And that way, those elements that maybe they'll kind of stick out to you folks a little bit more if they're kind of packaged together into a document, where you can say, oh, maybe it doesn't really make sense for city council to, maybe we should pick our own officers and pick our own chairs and stuff like that. Maybe they'll stick out a little bit better that way if they're kind of packaged within a document, because the overall sense I'm getting is that there just isn't an overwhelming need to rock the boat, but just some more organization and stability could really help. So.
And Brian, if I may interject, I think that this is an opportunity to review some of the policies that we've found and just consider, are those still relevant? Is there anything that we don't need anymore, or is there something that we need to add? As Nathan had suggested, and I think some previous discussion that had taken place, speaking to, does another start time work better for people? Should we be looking at it at a different day? We are a little constrained with that, but we have some options to consider, how and when the board operates.
Can we think of like a creative way to, like you ever heard like a doodle poll or something, like where everybody kind of picks dates and times that, I'm wondering if there's kind of a creative way to, try to find a date that works a little bit better, because, having the board being small, I think it's great, but it obviously, and we've seen it recently, it's a bit frustrating for ourselves and for applicants when we don't have a quorum. So I think having a time that everybody's pretty confident they can make work regularly is really super important. I don't know.
Hey, Brian, this is Michelle. Sorry, I wasn't going to talk tonight, so I don't have my camera hooked up, but, we're happy to offer going back and having the meetings at the Small Business Resource Center in Derby, if that's an option. We've been kind of on lockdown these last couple of years because of the pandemic, but Nancy and I are talking about reopening the Resource Center. And so that is an option for the board to consider as well, if they want to meet in person and if they want to do it in Derby.
Michelle, thank you for that's kind of exactly the type of thing I think Nathan and I are looking for. And I personally love that idea. It's not really my role to make those kinds of decisions, but I like the idea of bringing this back to the community a little bit, especially as things start to get more normal. But we kind of need that feedback from you guys. We need that push. We need that direction from you folks, the members of the board, because I'm just the lawyer. I'll write up whatever. I've got to kind of be told what to do. But I think that's a great suggestion, Michelle, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
So with that, it seems like we have some direction to come back with a stripped down version of the rules of procedures for Planning Commission, incorporating the information that we have from various sources that are specific to Derby review. And we'll bring that back for another study session next month or the month after. We did see this as a set of study sessions so that we could really get to the essence of what the Derby Review Board is looking for. And hopefully we can put together something that really reflects who the board is.
I think that's well said, and a good note to end on, at least for my portion of the presentation, unless anybody has anything else to add.
Just one more comment from me. I'm all in favor of going back to in-person meetings. I just think I prefer it. One thing I would comment would be, if we do in-person meetings, definitely the hours have to be after regular working hours for me to be able to make that. I work in Englewood, and so it's a real long round trip in the middle of the day to try to get to a meeting up in Derby. And so just that would be my request, is we could target kind of an evening time frame if we're going to do in person.
Okay, that sounds good. And so when we bring this new document to the board at the next session. We'll probably have some blank spaces for discussion items, just
Yeah.
like that.
I think it'll either be, I'll try to work in some blank spaces or carry over things from existing documents and sort of highlight them as like, this might be something that we want to think about changing. Like, for example, I really get a kick out of how the charter says each board or commission shall choose its own officers. And then when you go to the Derby policies and procedures document, it says the city council shall choose the chair. And I'm just like, those things don't really sync up. If you want to keep it that way, you know, that's totally fine, but that's just, I just thought that was kind of interesting that the charter bestows these boards and commissions sort of the authority to kind of run their own show. And you guys are content enough to just be like, council chairperson. But, you know.
So could I say something?
Yeah.
So with that, I guess I didn't know about that because I don't believe city council has picked our chairs.
Yeah.
We've been doing it ourselves.
No, and I kind of figured, I mean, I'm new to the board. I've only, you know, in a few of these meetings, but that's the sense that I kind of got. So if we could, you know, this is an informal board and there's a lot of institutional knowledge that I'd kind of like to get on paper, basically, like some institutional practices and just some of the ways that you all do things and want to conduct your business. And again, I don't want to go crazy with it, but that's a perfect example of what I'm looking for here. Let's get a document together that is consistent with the actual practice of the board.
I agree.
Okay, so Tricia, I do have a question for you. Is it appropriate to invite the board members to email the staff, specifically Nathan and Brian, about any further ideas or questions that they have regarding any rules of procedures?
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay, so then you're formally invited to send any comments or questions or ideas on to Nathan and Brian. And if you don't have their email addresses, we'll make sure that you get them.
I know that everybody has Kim's email address. She's the one that sends everything out. So it might be an easier kind of dump to have it all go to Kim, and then she can compile it and forward it on to you all too as an option.
Perfect. Thank you, Tricia. Should we move on to the next item?
Really quickly, just for planning purposes, do we have an idea of when the next study session might be? Just so I can mark that on the calendar here. Nathan, would you?
Likely May. There are a few projects in the pipeline right now. So April, we may have a few projects coming through for approval. And May would be an open date, but right now everything's very much in review and in the works.
Yeah, and the good thing is it's not like the board can't function. Like it's not like our hands are tied. So there's no real crazy rush on this, but you know, the earlier the better. But I think May is plenty of time. And then you know, I think it'd be helpful too to you know, having meetings in the interim, seeing how those go, like get some new ideas. So appreciate the heads up.
Thank you, Brian. So we'll look at bringing this back in May. And then now I think we have some updates from economic development. Nancy, Michelle, did you have some things to report on?
Thank you, Anita. I know with the last meeting that we had, we were kind of rushed through some of the projects that we're working on in Derby with the murals. So I'm happy to share some more detail about that. And I know time is always the issue, so I will be very brief about it. So let me share my screen. Okay. So my name's Nancy Flock. I recognize a lot of names on here. I'm an economic development specialist with the city, and Michelle Klamers is also on the call. She's our economic development director, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the grant, a Colorado Main Street Open Business Grant that we applied for in August. That kind of was a good learning experience for some work around Derby and the murals, and our small business resource, and some more of the work that we're doing there. And then, of course, the murals that we'll look at. So the Colorado Main Street program, Open for Business program, we found out about it in the summer. Last summer, we all know that our small businesses are really what make our communities unique. So we're always trying to find ways to help them. We tried to apply for some funding that would allow businesses in historic downtown districts to receive funding for facade and energy improvements. Unfortunately, their timeline was very tight, and there was a lot of restrictions and requirements and things. And so that limited the number of applications we were able to submit for the program. And then unfortunately, we did not receive the funding. However, we did learn a lot about the Derby district businesses and kind of, essentially the heart of Commerce City. And we found out that there's an opportunity to do some touch-up work to some historic murals in the area. As you all know, this is the Derby area. It's a triangle shaped area in the heart of Commerce City. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, as everyone is very familiar there. It's definitely been quite active over the last few years, but there's also a lot of potential to kind of make it a real destination for the city. And then the Small Business Resource Center, like Michelle mentioned earlier, is also available in a dedicated space to holding workshops and trainings. And then potentially in the future, we'll be able to hold some of these Derby Review Board meetings at this site. So when we found out that we were not being awarded the funds to do facade and energy improvements through the Colorado Main Street Business Grant, we were able to find a connection that former council member Guardiola had to Metropolitan State University's Professor Carlos Fresquez. Professor Fresquez was involved in this original painting of this mural that you see here. This is actually located on the north side of a building that's currently a high-low check cashing business that's located right next door to the Small Business Resource Center. This mural is called the Women's Mural, and some of you might know it was painted in 2004 through a partnership between Metro College and Commerce City Cultural Council. At that time, it was headed by Iris Scanton, a local artist, and some of the women that were painted were Marge Christensen, which was a longtime city council member, Lily Shin, a longtime resident and Girl Scout leader, Harriet Ferris, and then a local artist, Angela Ramirez, is actually in this painting. And we found out last week she's also on the Cultural Council. So it's kind of exciting to really be able to highlight folks from the community and continue to preserve that sense of local community and local history. So as you can see, that mural's held up pretty well since 2004, but kind of like everything over time, the weather and things take its toll on things. So towards the top of the image there, you'll notice some paint fading, and that's what we're excited to partner with Metropolitan State University to be able to restore that and make it more vibrant. And then this other mural is depicting the past, present, and future of Commerce City. It was started in the year 2000, and it's located on the north side of the Save-A-Lot grocery store. So that sits just north of the Small Business Resource Center and that high-low check cashing business that we talked about last. So with this project, Community Enterprise had started the concept. They helped secure some funds from the Denver Foundation and found some artists to start it. After a few months on the project, the group had pulled out of the project, and they had a head artist, Andy Mendoza, decided to kind of work on it himself and complete it. But over time, he did have to quit due to lack of resources and lack of history information between the years of 1940 and 2000. So to make up for that lack of history information, they decided just to paint children here that you see kind of there on the right hand smaller shot of the image. And then later on, artist Mark Hernandez also decided to continue working on that mural and worked on the piece that shows the spaceship as a sign of the future. And then so this is a vacant suite that we are anticipating an ice cream shop to go into. The building owners are very supportive of a mural project on their blank canvas, if you will. And that would be just another nice, colorful addition to the Derby district. The mural class that's going to be doing that touch-up work on the past slides that we talked about is going to be from May 31st, and it's going to kick off with a community input meeting. So for any new mural image that would go on this wall here. And then the work will continue through July 2nd. So basically on that first day of class, those students are going to meet with community members. That's a chance for community members to share any visions for designs they'd like to see on it. And then of course, express anything that they really would not like to see on that, which is very important as well. And then those students will take those ideas back to their sketch pads and then come back the next week with some ideas, based on the conversation that they had. And then that second week, that meeting would be kind of where essentially that decision of what image would go up would happen. So we're really excited and looking forward to seeing what the community and those students create. So that's what some more detail kind of on that mural project that we have planned for Derby. Happy to open it up for any questions, and thank you so much for your time today.
I have a question.
Yes.
So is there going to be any updates to the mural that's on the west side of Tasty Donuts? I think it says Joe Riley, I think.
Oh, I think another one, it just kind of says Derby
Yeah,
area, and it's
that
kind
one.
of in front of that park, kind of like a light green
Yeah.
color of the Derby logo. We haven't really discussed that. And when you're mentioning updates, are you thinking like a complete new design or just touching up the paint?
Just touching it up, kind of
Touching it up?
bringing in a little bit more color to it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we haven't discussed that, but since you've brought that up, we'll have a conversation about it. And I could see how brightening it up to, as we're doing all this other work at once would definitely make sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Nancy tonight? Okay, seeing none, we have one more item on the agenda tonight, and that would be Nathan discussing the Derby Review Board calendar.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I think I was on the wrong screen. I have the pleasure of sharing probably the least exciting item on the agenda. It's the 2022 Derby Review Board calendar. Can you all see that? I can't tell. Okay. In essence, staff feels it's important to distribute to the review board and in general have an outward facing calendar for upcoming Derby Review Board dates. This is important for attendance as well as future planning for board members as well as staff. Also on the calendar are important dates for when packets are distributed to the board and the public in general, as well as typically when our administrative staff reaches out to the board to inform them that there is a board meeting scheduled. This on your last page of your packet. And again, this is just something that we feel the board should have and that staff will start creating at the start of every year to distribute for future planning. And since we are likely or the possibility of changing the meeting date and time, this is subject to change once we have all that figured out. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the items that staff had on the agenda to bring to you tonight. Chair Mikado, did you want to close the meeting?
I'd like to say thank you to everybody for all your hard work. And I guess we can adjourn. Everybody have a safe evening.
Take care,
Thank
everybody.
you.
You as
Bye,
well.
guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
And